Good afternoon, and welcome to the Real World Perspectives on Poverty Solutions speaker series. I'm glad to have you all here with us today at the School of Social Work for an exciting talk by Victoria Burton Harris and Ellie Savit. I'm really excited to have them here today. And we'll have them introduced in just a second. I have a few announcements about the series generally. One, there's some cookies and coffee at the back, so you're welcome to kind of head back and pick that up as it becomes available. It just arrived. I'd also like to welcome people who are watching over YouTube through our live stream. We are doing these hybrid, following on our practice from during the pandemic. We'll hear from Ellie and Victoria and then have a time for questions. I'll be walking around a microphone at that time. So I'm excited to kind of hear your engagement. There's also a class that goes alongside this speaker series. And so just a reminder to the students that you can record your attendance on classquestion.com. Remember, the code is DHJHX. So with that, I'll stop talking and introduce my colleague, JJ Prescott, who will introduce our speakers.
Great. Thank you so much, Trevor. I'm JJ Prescott. I'm the Henry King Ransom Professor of Law at UM. I study criminal law and in particular prosecutorial behavior and policy. So I'm especially delighted to introduce you to our local county prosecutors, Ellie Savit and Victoria Burton Harris. Ellie Savit serves as the elected prosecutor for Washtenaw County. His 4-year term began in January of last year. He formerly served as a law clerk to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was a civil rights and public interest attorney, and started his career as a public school teacher. Most recently, Ellie served as the City of Detroit's senior legal counsel, where he led criminal justice reform work. Ellie is an alum of our law school as well, and a lucky one since he managed to avoid having me as a professor. Victoria Burton Harris serves as the Chief Assistant Prosecutor for Washtenaw County. In 2014, she opened a private law firm in the heart of downtown Detroit, specializing in family law and criminal defense at the state and federal court level. Her passion for justice and equality has led to her involvement in several grassroots organizations as a legal advisor or board member. For instance, she is the chair of the board of directors for We the People Opportunity Farm, an organization that serves to break the cycle of incarceration by employing only formerly incarcerated interns. Victoria also sits on the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, the Board of Directors for the National Lawyers Guild Michigan chapter, and the Board of Directors for Covenant House Michigan, a youth homeless shelter where she developed a mentoring program for residents. We are really lucky also over at the law school because both Victoria and Ellie somehow find time to teach classes to our students, and they do so regularly and to great fanfare, so thank you. Personally, I have been extremely fortunate to be able to work with Ellie and Victoria closely in recent months on their office's Prosecutor Transparency Project. Without getting into too much detail about the project, the goal is to marshal existing office data and to develop new data resources to identify and better understand the precise sources of racial and other disparities in prosecutorial practices. An important part of that project is making data and analysis from the office easy to digest and available to the public through an online community dashboard, a part of the project that is being spearheaded by Poverty Solutions and our own Trevor Bechtel right here. So thank you. Ellie and Victoria really care about this project, as made very evident by the many hours they've spent on Zoom calls asking our detailed and probably often annoying questions. Ellie and Victoria have brought other important changes to the criminal justice system in Washtenaw County, all with the goal of improving fairness, safety, and justice in our community. The prosecutor's office in Washtenaw County no longer has zero tolerance policies, no longer seeks cash bail, no longer prosecutes contraband cases that arise from pretext stops, and avoids charging juveniles with minor offenses that are best resolved outside of the criminal justice system. These are evidence-based changes that are making our system stronger and more fair. With apologies for taking so long, and without further ado, welcome Victoria and Ellie.
Thank you for that. Good afternoon to all of you. Can you all hear me okay? All right, good stuff. As you've been told, I'm Victoria Burton Harris. I'm the Chief Assistant Prosecutor for Washtenaw County. And just to kind of give you an idea with that bio that you heard, how I ended up being a prosecutor, it's a very funny story even to this day for myself. I would never have expected it years ago because I thought I was going to dedicate my career to defending people as a criminal defense attorney. And while I did do that for a number of years, and I absolutely loved it, I have very fond memories. That time will forever hold a special place in my heart, as will my former clients. I was approached at some point in my career and asked to consider a run for Wayne County prosecutor. And initially I said no. And in fact, it was a very impassioned no that turned into like a hell no, leave me alone. Don't ever ask me to do that, because why would I do such a thing? I did not, to be honest, have a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings at the time as a defense attorney about prosecutors because of my experience in the courtroom with policies in the office at the time that I was practicing in not just Wayne County, but Genesee County, Oakland County, Kalamazoo County. Prosecution just in general, the traditional approach was very heavy on punishment and not centering people's humanity and the harm that all people were suffering enough. And that's actually what led me to take up that mantle and say, yes, I will go ahead and run to become a prosecutor. But there are going to be things that are non-negotiables for me. Folks said, yes, that's exactly why we want you to do it. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to have policies like you just heard our office now has. I wanted to stop our reliance on cash bail. I wanted to give prosecutors in the courtroom an opportunity to decide how their cases would be resolved, including a full dismissal without having to go several stories up in the building to get permission from a supervisor. I wanted folks to not have to pay for past mistakes for the rest of their lives with sentencing enhancements. I wanted folks to not be further criminalized for exercising their right to hold a preliminary exam and be punished with added charges that carried mandatory sentences. And so while I was not successful in my run for prosecutor, my very good friend here in Washtenaw County, Ellie Savit, was successful. We had become friends because we had almost identical platforms. And he called me up shortly after the primary. And this is a part of what I tell people is our like friendship love story. He called me up and asked me if I would consider helping him run his office here in Washtenaw County. And I tried to play coy initially and like, I got to really think about this. I don't know if I'm going to do that and move my family out there with you. But it was a no-brainer. I didn't even ask him what the pay was, and I called back and I was like, yes, 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 I'll do it. Yes, yes, yes. And so I picked my family up and we moved to Ann Arbor, and we have been a team ever since. I say outside of marrying my husband and having my child, working with my partner and brother Ellie is one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life, because he allows me to be exactly who I am, center racial equity in the work that I do every day, be very creative in building out solutions and paths to either get people out of the system and, most importantly, to really keep them from coming in altogether if we can help it. I like to tell people that this work sets my soul on fire, and I'm very honored and excited to share just a little bit of that with you today. I'll kick it over to you, Ellie.
All right, thank you. So much like Victoria, I did not come into this space as a career prosecutor. My background is more as a public interest, civil rights attorney. And what I'd seen throughout my career was not so much the criminal justice system writ large, but the cascading consequences that can arise from inequity in our justice system. Through the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to represent criminal defendants pro bono that were sitting in prison because of an overly harsh decision that was made by a prosecutor, a decision to overcharge a case far beyond what was necessary to ensure public safety. I've represented folks in immigration proceedings, people that have been in this country. One of my clients had been in this country from the time he was a 4-year-old boy and was facing deportation at 65 or 66 years old for something he had done 30 years ago. And they were trying to send him back to a country that he knew no one in, they didn't speak the language in, all because of one past mistake. My previous job before working here was actually in the city of Detroit, where we were trying really hard to get folks jobs, get folks back to work. But a major barrier for so many people was an old criminal record. Not even necessarily anything serious, not even anything really recent, but something from 10, 20 years ago was preventing people from moving forward with their lives, from providing for their families, from entering the career that they wanted to enter just because they had that old conviction. So I'd seen from many angles the way in which our criminal legal system was really holding us back, was imposing these significant collateral consequences, and importantly, reducing mobility in our society. And it has pronounced racial and socioeconomic effects, because the truth of the matter is, nationwide, Black people, people of color, are far more likely than white people to be arrested, to be charged, to be convicted. And when they are convicted, they're sentenced disproportionately to harsh sentences. So this is not something that affects everybody equally, but the consequences, the cascading consequences are pronounced. So much like Victoria, I was working in Detroit, living here. I'm born and raised in Ann Arbor, minding my own business, and people wanted somebody new to run for prosecutor. And so some folks approached me and they said, we think you'd be really good for this. And I told them no, just like Victoria did, because I said, that's not the type of lawyer I am. That's not what I want to do. But then I started thinking about it. I started thinking, you know, at every step of my career, in the various ways that I've served, I've seen how the decisions of prosecutors, the discretionary decisions of prosecutors, have far-reaching consequences that can last not just for the time that somebody is serving their sentence or the time that they're in the courtroom, but really for the rest of their lives. And if you really care about that, it matters who's pulling the levers. It matters who's making those decisions. It matters who is in the prosecutor's office. So I decided to run. And I decided to run, of course, in Washtenaw County. And obviously I won, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But we don't need to talk about the election. Victoria already told you our courtship story. By the way, as soon as she lost in Wayne County, I knew I wanted to get her as the chief assistant prosecutor. I was just, you know, you got to play a little bit coy, right? But I ran in Washtenaw County. And these inequities are particularly pronounced in Washtenaw County, where we're all sitting. Because, you know, though we pride ourselves on being a progressive community, on being a community that cares about equity, the truth of the matter is that Washtenaw County is one of the most racially and socioeconomically stratified communities, not just in the state of Michigan, but in the entire country. We're sitting here in Ann Arbor, which is largely white, which is largely well-to-do. Not to say that everybody here is, but that's the truth of the matter. But if you go east towards Ypsilanti Township, you've got more majority-minority census tracts. You've got pronounced pockets of poverty. That's, by the way, true in other parts of our county as well. It takes a real racial aspect, but also if you go north of here to Whitmore Lake, there's pockets of pronounced poverty too. And as you see across the country, where the criminal legal system sees the majority of its cases come from these pockets of lower economic mobility, which tend to be focused on racial lines as well. So when we talk about pursuing equity, about trying to build a fairer system and not hold people back for the rest of their lives, and to do so in a way that promotes racial and socioeconomic equity, there can potentially be no better place to do that than in Washtenaw County, just because those disparities are so pronounced. So what does that mean exactly on the ground? We told you a little bit about how we got here. And now I think we want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, and then hopefully have some time for question and answers. But I want to start with something that JJ Prescott mentioned, which is our Prosecutor Transparency Project. Right before our administration took office, there was a report from an organization called Citizens for Racial Equity in Washtenaw, which concluded that Black people in Washtenaw County were between 3 and 29 times as likely relative to the population share to be charged with certain types of felonies than white people. Between 3 and 29 times as likely. So really staggering racial disparities. What we didn't know from that report, because it was based on publicly accessible data, is the points in the system that we are seeing that inequity manifest. Is it the case that the prosecutor's office, for example, is disproportionately charging Black people versus white people when we get requests from law enforcement to charge somebody? Are we overcharging Black people versus white people? So, similar types of activity, but a Black person catches a harsher felony charge where maybe a white person only gets a misdemeanor for similar conduct. Maybe there's inequities in how cases are ultimately coming out, and white people are disproportionately getting an opportunity for second chances, for diversions, for better plea deals than Black people. And the truth of the matter is, we knew these inequities existed. We knew they existed on racial lines, but because historically the justice system has not taken the opportunity to introspect on this, and frankly, our systems aren't even really well set up for this, as JJ can attest to, not just here in Washington County, but across the country. We really didn't have an idea about why it was happening. So the Prosecutor Transparency Project is something that we're both very proud of, because it is going to be the first, and I actually think nationwide, the most robust look at the decision-making made by prosecutors. At every point in the system, we're looking at what are the decisions being made and how are they being made differently for people of different races. And the point of it is not just to say, like, okay, here's a report that's going to sit on a shelf, is to drive improvements, right? Because if we suspected that anybody in our office was consciously making choices based on somebody's race, they would not be in the office anymore. And everybody in the office knows that. That will come as no surprise to them. But we all know that bias can take place across a number of vectors, both implicit and explicit. And if we don't look at this data, look at what's going on, look at squarely in the face, and then take efforts to address it, we're frankly just bearing. That's a remix. Yeah, we're frankly just burying our heads in the sand. So it's something that's really important to us. But going through data, as we've learned over the last couple of years, takes a very long time. There's something called data cleaning and regressions and everything like that, which none of us know about because we're lawyers, right? And we didn't need to wait for the data to come through to address some of the things that we knew were inequitable in the prosecutor's office. And so we're going to just talk briefly about a few of those, although there's a whole lot more that we can talk about as well. But I want to start with the very first policy that we put into place when we took office, which is to eliminate the so-called zero tolerance policies that the previous prosecutor's office maintained. Zero tolerance policies are exactly what they sound like. They suggest that if you did a certain things, if a crime meets certain elements, there's zero tolerance for that. And everybody is getting the same punishment, getting the same charges, no matter what the underlying factual circumstances, no matter what's going on in that person's lives. And these are really popular across the country because they make wonderful bumper sticker slogans for prosecutors that are running for election, right? I'll give you an example that was previously in place in our office. Zero tolerance for gun crimes. Now, we take gun violence very seriously. I want to be very clear about that, right? And zero tolerance for gun crime sounds like a really great policy to have because you're sending a message. You're being tough, right? You're making sure that you're taking gun violence seriously. But I was going to tell you a real story from before we took office that demonstrates how that can lead to significant injustice. There was a woman who was transitioning. And like many people who are transitioning, she was experiencing some depression. And one evening, she told her partner that she was going to kill herself. And she drove away, took a gun in the car, and drove out to a nearby park. Her partner called the police, not because wanted to get her in trouble, but to help, right? My partner is potentially going to kill herself. She said she was going to kill herself. I know where she is. She's got a gun in the car, right? Can you please go do something? Can you please go help? Police arrived and thankfully were able to prevent her from harming herself. But she did not have what's called a concealed pistol license. And she had a gun in the car, which means that it is technically a felony. It's called carrying a concealed weapon. Police officers wrote the report. Fine, you have to write a report when you're called out to a scene. Gave it to the prosecutor's office. Well, zero tolerance for gun crimes, right? So she got charged with a felony. Now you think about what happens the next time somebody's in that situation, right? Not only is that unjust, think about the downstream consequences. We should want people, when their loved ones are potentially going to be harming themselves, to be able to call for help. But if we're putting them in a choice between saying, well, if I call for help, they might be charged with a felony, they might not do that. And so we put them in an untenable situation the next time around between calling for help and between potentially facing the criminal consequences because they called for help. That's not just, that's not equitable, and that's what zero tolerance policies do. So very first thing at 9 a.m. on January 1st, 2021, we got rid of all of those. Doesn't mean that we don't treat serious crimes seriously. We do. But we take stock of the individualized story that is every single case that comes through our office, and no outcome is off the table. And that's important because that's how, frankly, any of us, I think, would hope to be treated if we found our way into the criminal legal system, either as a victim, as a defendant, as a witness, whatever. If you had your mother that was coming through the criminal system on any side, you would hope that the prosecutor's office would treat that story that brought her into the system as a defendant, as a victim, as the unique human story, taking into account all the circumstances and proceed accordingly. With respect to some of the ways this plays out, that means that, for example, we give young people increasingly opportunities to emerge from the system with a clean criminal record under a statute that's known as the Holmes Youthful Trainee Act, which basically says if you come into the system, you're young, you're under 26 years old, you abide by the terms of probation, you do everything right, you can emerge without ever having that charge on your record in the first place. Previous policies said there's only certain cases in which you can do that. We said, look, it's not going to adversely impact public safety. This should actually be presumed, right? We should be giving young people a second chance and avoiding the potential for a criminal record that's going to hold them back. Moving to the second policy that we put into place, and JJ mentioned this at the start, but we no longer seek cash bail. And if you want to talk about something that by its very function is socioeconomically inequitable, our cash bail system is front and center. Cash bail, for those who don't know, is a system in which you're charged with a crime and you go before a judge, and the judge says, you can get out of jail pending trial, presumption of innocence, everything like that, but only if you come up with a certain amount of money out of your pocket to basically buy your freedom. Maybe that's $1,000, maybe it's $25,000, maybe it's $1 million, right? But unless you come up with that amount of money, you're going to sit in jail. But if you have it, you can go free. If we were starting a criminal justice system from scratch today and somebody came up with that idea, I think they'd be laughed out of the room, right? Because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We're prosecutors, look, and I don't want to hide the ball here. We do seek to hold people in jail pending trial sometimes, right? When they pose a danger to the community. But whether you're held pending trial should be based on the threat that you pose, not based on how much money you have in your bank account. When you rely on a cash bail system, it means that people, and there are real cases like this, people can be in jail for days, weeks, months because they couldn't afford $500 or $1,000 when they were doing nothing more dangerous than to take a real case out of Detroit from the ACLU lawsuit. Guy was in jail for a week because he didn't have $200 because he was staying in the park after dark. $200 staying in the park after dark, and he sat in jail for a week just because he didn't have enough money to pay his way out. The flip side of that, by the way, is true also. If you're dangerous, I don't really care how much money you have. How is coming up with that amount of money going to make the community any safer? And, by the way, if you want to look at a good example of this, remember when Kyle Rittenhouse killed several people in Wisconsin? Well, he got out of jail, right? Because he was able to come up with $3 million. Now, maybe you think Kyle Rittenhouse was dangerous. Maybe you don't. Frankly, I would have sought to keep him in. But how is the community made any safer by the fact that he was able to come up with $3 million? If you think he's dangerous, he should be held there. It shouldn't be based on how much money you have in your bank account. So again, we do seek to hold people, right? There are dangerous people out there that come through our system, and we need to do what we need to do to keep the community safe. But one's wealth shouldn't play a role there. It should be based on how dangerous they are, not how much money you have in your bank account. And to tie this back to the equity perspective, it's like on its face, socioeconomically inequitable that we have this cash bail system in the United States of America. But it's also severely racially inequitable. Because what have we done in this country over the course of hundreds of years but deny Black people and Black families the opportunity to attain generational wealth? Starting with the literal theft of labor through slavery, moving forward into the Jim Crow era, into Black people being denied employment opportunities, redlining, which denies Black people and has denied Black people an opportunity to purchase a home, which is the #1 driver of accumulated wealth in the United States of America. When we're talking about somebody trying to come up with a certain amount of money to buy their way out of jail, they need to have accumulated wealth. You can't be put on a layaway plan with a cash bail system. So owning a home, right? Having generational wealth, having family wealth, precisely what we have as a country denied Black people the opportunity to attain is exactly what drives the cash bail system. And so by not relying on that anymore, number one, I think we're keeping the community safer because we're not, trying to just let people out if they have enough money. Number two, we are really trying to get to the heart of a lot of the inequities that exist and have cyclical effects in our justice system and build on the broader inequities. And I'll turn it back over to Victoria for more stuff.
All right. My handy dandy mic on here. So I want to continue with moving forward with some other policies and programs that we have built out in our office. In addition to our zero tolerance policies, not relying on cash bail, we have also, like I mentioned earlier, tried to be very creative with how we help people and how we get to the root cause of why they came into the system. You cannot be intentional about undoing hundreds of years of harm if you are not looking much deeper beneath the surface. Why did this person come into the system? And the better question, how can we help them avoid coming back? One of the first programs that we talked about that I was ecstatic to help get off the ground was a pre-plea diversion program. And I was excited about it because it is not like any other diversion program that we have heard about or had in the state of Michigan. It's the first of its kind. Being a former criminal defense attorney, I know the moment someone enters into a guilty plea, even if it's under the prosecutor's deferred or delayed sentence, it's still a guilty plea. And it shows up on your record as such for the 6, 9, 12 months that you are on this diversionary track. So that means that if you go to apply for a job while you are on probation after entering a temporary guilty plea that will later come off your record, a potential employer can see that. I've had clients who were in those positions and in that situation, and I would have to write a letter on letterhead to explain to a potential employer, no, this person, while they did plead guilty, it's temporary, it will come off their record. Employers are not trying to hear that all the time. And folks, we're not being able to obtain jobs, and we're oftentimes even losing jobs. I also had clients that I would have to advise, you cannot enter into a guilty plea, even if it will later be dismissed, because it's going to trigger devastating immigration consequences for you. What do you mean? I'm not convicted. It does not matter. You are automatically rendered deportable just by the mere entry of a guilty plea. No conviction is necessary. You also don't have an opportunity to obtain certain housing options or to have access to certain housing options. If you're a senior, if you've entered a guilty plea, depending on the nature of the plea, you're not allowed to go into senior housing. I represented a young man, well, I call him a young man, but he was a young man in senior housing. And he got into a back and forth with a resident over some money that had been exchanged and was charged with a felony. And while given an opportunity to plead it down to a less severe felony, he could not take that offer because the moment he entered into a guilty plea, even if it was later going to be dismissed, he was booted out of his housing. That's why I was really proud when we sat around a table and we said, let's do a diversion program, but let's not require people to plead guilty. And the reason for that is we know the devastating consequences, as I've just explained to you, that guilty pleas can have. And then we took it a step further. Let's pay for it. We have the money in our budget. So if we're not putting people on probation, we're not passing off the probation oversight fees that are mandated by statute that they pay every month. And if they do not pay it and they do everything else that they're required to do on probation, their case is still not closed because they owe that money. Well, let's take that barrier away. So let's not have folks pay probation oversight fees. Let's not even put people on probation because that's a whole other set of problems that people experience. When you're on probation, you're not allowed to just freely move without permission from the court and the jurisdiction in which you are tethered to under probation. You have a lot of requirements that may have nothing to do with the reason why you came into the criminal legal system, like drug and alcohol testing, when you haven't even been charged with anything related to drugs or alcohol. But some judges say that's just a standard for all of my probationers. No drugs, no alcohol. But that testing is not free. You got to pay for it. And if you can't pay for it and you don't do it, do you think you successfully complete probation? No. You're forever tethered to the system until you successfully complete. We were trying to, again, avoid all of the reasons why people continue to cycle back through the criminal legal system. And so we said, we're going to pilot a program in the largest district court in Washington County, Ann Arbor. 3 judges sit in that one district court. And we are going to go through the court docket before each hearing, so a week before. And we're going to look at every single person that's set to appear in front of a judge on that particular day. We're going to read everything that we can about them, not just the current case, but if they've had 10 other cases in our office, we're going to read all of those reports and we're going to try to construct this person's life so that we can say, aha, this might be the reason why you keep coming back. Oh, you continue to steal alcohol from the local 7-Eleven or CVS right here on State Street. You don't just like have a klepto problem. You have a drinking problem. This is a no-brainer. Let's get you into some treatment. Let's not require you to pay for it. Let's not require you to enter a guilty plea while you're getting the help that you need. Let's just do the right thing that we know is the right thing to do. And let's get you on the path so that you can not just be successful, but you don't come back here again. I'll give you an example of a case out of our pre-plea diversion program. We had a woman who, on its face, it just looked like from the police report, she had no respect for authority and just was randomly stealing hygiene products, things like toothpaste, the basics from a local grocery store. And she was charged with it. Stealing is a crime, yes. But why? Why is a woman who on paper looks like she once had the means to do this stealing? Well, come to find out, she just lost her husband. She was grieving. Money was funny. And this was how, oddly enough, she dealt with the grief. Taking items, not paying for them, taking things that she needed. Well, we put her in front of a caseworker. And our caseworkers really are the wonderful probation agents at the 15th District Court who said, even though you won't put people in probation, we won't act as probation agents for your program. We'll serve as caseworkers. We're familiar with the resources and services and programs available in Washtenaw County. We are happy to tell people that you put in this program based on a needs assessment that we will do with them and their defense attorney, where we see their needs, ask them to confirm, and we will create together a plan of attack for them for the next 6 months that they follow. Hopefully, again, getting to the root cause of the issue. And once they successfully are done with this program and they follow every action item or step in that co-created plan, the prosecutor's office eagerly dismisses the case. And this woman went through grief counseling and a number of other programs and got some services that she needs. And now to this day, because she didn't have to enter a guilty plea, she was able to resurrect her career and get a very good paying job because she has no criminal record, not even a guilty plea was entered on her record. Those are the kind of ways that you can creatively approach the criminal legal system and actually help people, see the humanity in them. None of us are the worst thing that we've ever done. We apply a lot of forgiveness in our work. We give a whole lot of grace, and we try to work with folks in our community outside of our office because that's where the help really lies. We hope to shrink the footprint of the prosecutor's office as we continue down this road. We should not be in folks' lives for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. No, the help that you need is in the community. It is not with the prosecutor's office. So that's one of the many programs that we've created to do just that, to get to the heart of the issue that I am very proud of. I get sad that Ellie pulled that program from me, but as he reminds me, you don't create programs to run them, Vic. You create programs and you give them to folks in our office to help run them, and you continue to try to, alongside him, create more programs. And another such program that we created out of our office focuses on juveniles. But you gotta be, like I said, way more intentional in this work. You can't just say, oh yeah, we wanna help kids. Look at the kids you're bringing into the system. They don't look like Ellie. They look like me. And they mostly reside on the east side of the county, where the most impoverished residents of our county typically reside. So how do you help young Black boys from the east side of the county? You build a partnership with a program that services them called Washtenaw County My Brother's Keeper. And building a partnership with My Brother's Keeper that's run by a phenomenal brother named Jamal, who is musically inclined. Apparently Ellie grew up listening to his rap albums.
Yeah, Athletic Mike League was, I would follow around his group when I was in high school, so.
We recently went to a concert and I had no idea about any of this music, and I was sitting there like a grandma.
Victoria was sitting there with a cup of coffee at a rap concert. It was hilarious.
It was late, I'm tired. And so we created a partnership with them alongside, or that's being supported by Vera, so that we can, again, be more intentional about getting people out of the system. But we took it a step further. Let's keep them from coming into the system altogether. So when we receive petitions for some of these young folks, and we can look at their identifying information, and we can see that they meet the eligibility requirements for this program, we will immediately put them in contact with Jamal at My Brother's Keeper. And let me tell y'all, it's not just sending a quick email. Oftentimes, more often than not, it requires visits to grandma's house, to Aunt Kathy's house, visits to the school possibly by folks, not by our office, because that's not welcome. No person wants to see a prosecutor pop up at their school. But we will employ all different types of tactics to get folks to know this program is available. Do you want to go into it? And the program consists of, a couple of months in a cohort where you make these rap albums with other young people. Some of them are system involved, some of them are not. And when you're not making music, you're having conversations in a very therapeutic setting that is, they use restorative practices. They ask them questions about their thoughts, their feelings, their relationships with women, how they treat women, how they treat themselves, how they resolve conflict. That is so important for young people who may not have ever been taught that, because maybe they're centering survival every single day. And that's not something that's on their radar. And all they've seen around them is people respond with aggression out of a defensive nature, out of maybe the fear that if you don't, you will be the next victim. So maybe you think you should quickly victimize someone so that you are not victimized yourself. That's the thinking sometimes so many of our kids sadly have because of their circumstances, because of where they live. And My Brother's Keeper seeks to break that. This is a group of Black men across the spectrum, all different careers that come together and say, you're one of ours. We got you, we love you, and we will do anything for you, including keeping you out of the system. You complete this program, and you don't even have to be musically inclined. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you want to do the artwork for the album cover for the cohort. Maybe you are into music production. Maybe you're into something that has nothing to do with music, but that you can now bring to that program. Whatever it is, Jamal makes sure that he works with these young people one-on-one individually, including, again, like I said, transporting them, going to them. Hey, I haven't seen you in group. What's been going on? Come with me. And after they successfully complete that program, we get a note from him letting us know that the petition that came into our office several months ago for them, we do nothing with it. Tear it up, we don't ever authorize it. So really on paper, it's like you never came into the system to begin with. And that's the way it should be. These are our babies. They make mistakes just like we did. They don't just deserve a second chance. Oftentimes they haven't even had a first. So they certainly deserve 10, 11, 12, however many it takes, because we don't believe in throwing people away in this community. That's not who we are. Another program that we are very proud, actually it's a whole department that we are proud to have started in our office, is the Conviction, Integrity, and Expungement Unit. And I'm going to focus on the expungement side of it. When you have a criminal record, it follows you around for the rest of your life. Can you imagine the mistake that you made in third grade following you around now? It's ridiculous. And in my opinion, so are criminal records. But we have them. Can't get rid of them right now. But what we can do, thanks to the expansion of the law, is allow folks the opportunity to, for no cost, expunge an old criminal record if they're eligible. How do they know if they're eligible? We provide that service in our office free of charge. We will tell you if you are eligible by looking at your past criminal record, by even going to the courthouse and pulling the records, making sure that what's on them is correct, contacting Michigan State Police, because oftentimes the records that are online that are held with them are incorrect. And then we will put you in the hands of our various community partners, who will assign you to a defense attorney to represent you, who will help you go through the process of getting fingerprinted with law enforcement, continue assisting with pulling your records, and we will help you go from point A to point Z with this process, even though we cannot represent people at the prosecutor's office. We've made sure that we partner with folks because, again, if you've done everything right, which if you haven't gotten any new charges, committed any new crimes, you have. You're minding your business, you're living your life. Why should that follow you around? Why should your children be limited to where they live and therefore where they go to school? Because you can't live in certain places because of that record. You can't live in certain places because you can't work in certain places. So now you are forever trapped in this cycle of poverty because of something that you may have done 10, 15 years ago. Not the same person then. Why should you be treated as if you are? So I want to turn it over to Ellie to talk about one more program, but I just want to reiterate that when you look at a prosecutor's office, I hope more and more when you hear folks like Ellie and I speak, when you look across the country, you see more prosecutors like us doing that work, that maybe you start to envision a world where prosecutors, like I thought, are not bad guys, that the right folks in that office can do a world of good with that power. It does not always have to be used to harm people. And if you are creative enough and you have the right heart, you can absolutely be intentional about undoing the wrongs and the harm of the past.
Thanks, Victoria. I want to just build on a couple of the things that you talked about, which is with numbers. So you might, these are nice stories, right? Do they actually work? That pre-plea diversion program she talked about, I just got the most updated numbers this morning. Over a 92% success rate, which means that over 92% of the people that come in through that program successfully complete their course of treatment, get that criminal case dismissed at the end of it, don't commit any new crimes. Only 2 people in that entire program failed that program because they caught a new criminal offense, right? Some other people didn't show up for treatment and everything like that. But 92%, you don't see 92% success rates with virtually any program in the criminal system. We've done over 100 cases now. So it's a really successful program, not just through the stories, but through the data. Not a single kid that went through the My Brother's Keeper program has come back on our radar. Not one. And with expungements, our office has been able to help over 1,000 people determine whether they're eligible for expungement, and if they are, move forward in that process totally free of charge and give them a new lease on life. These are real numbers, real data, and I just wanted to highlight that as well. We've talked about equity, and I just want to close by highlighting the other side of things. You've heard a lot about how we're providing off-ramps to the criminal system. And to be clear, we still prosecute cases. One of the things that we began enforcement of, really, is one of the biggest categories of crime in the United States of America that exacerbates socioeconomic inequity, and really very little is done about it. And that is economic crime, specifically wage theft, which is employers stealing from their workers, shorting them the money that they owe, forcing them to pay taxes that maybe they're not required to pay, taking money out of their pockets. That is the biggest category of theft in the United States of America. It exceeds every other form of theft combined. So pickpocketing, people breaking into cars, people breaking into houses, wage theft dwarfs all of that. But historically, it's not something that has caught the attention of government. Crime, there's civil remedies, but it's very rarely reported because it's very rarely enforced. And in the spirit of promoting equity, the folks that are victims of wage theft most frequently are already those that are most vulnerable. They are members of our immigrant community, perhaps, younger workers, right? Folks that are working hourly jobs, folks that can be misclassified as independent contractors. And so we started a new unit just to address that, because we said, I want somebody that's going to wake up in the morning and this is going to be their focus. This is not going to be something that's at the bottom of the pile. It's complicated, don't want to deal with it. I've got this murder case, which is very important, obviously. So it's not going to be my focus. So we started a unit just to deal with wage theft, consumer scams, labor trafficking, housing issues, right? And it's a unit. It's a one-person unit right now. But we are really making strides in terms of getting folks to report and ultimately correcting behavior. Sometimes that involves going to court. A lot of times it involves sending a stern letter and telling you, we're on to you. We're going to go to court if you don't pay back this money and stop this practice. And we've been successful with that. That's real money back in the pockets of primarily the folks that can use it the most. We are about equity, and we're about accountability too, right? I mean, none of what we've talked about diminishes the need for accountability. We're just thinking of different ways to do it so that we can reduce our footprint and avoid the cascading consequences that come with the criminal system. But accountability has to go both ways. The fact that you do something behind a corporate form, the fact that you are rich, the fact that you do it, that you engage in theft through paperwork, right, rather than picking somebody's pocket, that shouldn't matter. You've got to be accountable for that too. And that's one of the things that we're really proud of ramping up in our office. So with that.
Thank you so much, Ellie and Victoria. It's a wonderful talk. We have some time for questions, and I'll just note to our YouTube audience that we lost our main camera about halfway through the talk, and so we switched to my computer's webcam. So I'm not going to be able to show you the question askers, but also to people on YouTube, you're welcome to ask questions using the chat, and we'll process those into the room. But let's turn to any questions that people have for Victoria and Ellie about these wonderful programs.
Okay, great talk, and great work being done there. Thank you very much. I'm thinking of the anti-democratic outcomes of a system that doesn't promote due process at times, that promotes double jeopardy, doesn't treat people as individuals with a history and different motives. And what that does to our hopes for improving our democracy. Because surely we have work to do. And how ingrained are those anti-democratic tendencies? I think they stem from superstition, from false assumptions, from economic disparities that have their roots so far back that they're entrenched. And the multiple sources of bias, not only racism, but ageism. As I get older and I get grayer, that's become a worry. Anti this, anti that. The opportunities of people in with prosecutorial responsibility of using their position to become a star and using it to get elected to higher office. Thanks for your work, folks.
Thank you. I want to let you know at least my outlook and perspective. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot that we'll be able to do with a whole lot of folk. And that's why I don't concern myself with it, because we have work to do. We have minds that we are able to change. Ellie and I, we work so well together because, as you can tell, he's a data man. I'm a feelings gal. And together we work very well. I'm a firm believer that you change the system by changing people, helping them to increase their capacity for empathy. And you do that, maybe sometimes with data, sometimes with stories. When those stories hit home, and it's not just a person on the other side of town, but it's now your son or your daughter that has a drug issue that you now want to be treated as a public health crisis and not as a criminal issue. The story starts to change and shift in your mind. So does your attitude. So does your perspective. And therefore, so does your voice. That's where I want to focus. And it's real easy as prosecutors, as an elected and an appointed prosecutor. If you want, it's real easy to just sit in your little ivory tower in your office, wait for maybe some problems to come up to you. You solve a couple of them. Go out, have a bourbon, golf, fly wherever to do whatever. Easy to do that. We prefer to spend our time, not really in our offices, as much as we prefer to be in the community. Ellie's favorite part of the job, he often tells people, is going to expungement fairs, because he then has an opportunity to see the people whose lives his power will impact in a positive way. My favorite part about this job is anytime I am in the community, because what I do not want to do is get so complacent in this position and I only see people at their worst. No one comes into the prosecutor's office as a defendant, a witness, a victim, and have a good day. So I don't want to see people just when they are at their worst. I want to see people when they're at their best. I want to see people at book fairs. I want to see people lining up throughout a community, passing library books from one person to another to stock a library so that our children can read and they can learn, because we know that that's a key indicator for how the rest of their lives will go. So I think it's up to each individual that's in power, how they choose to behave while in power. Do you spend your time with the people who need you most, who have the solutions? They're just are the furthest from the resources and the power to give themselves those solutions, and you have that. So you marry what you have with what they have, and together you come together as a community and you find solutions and make it happen, because that is one of my favorite abolitionists, Miriam Kaba. She says that's the answer. We don't have the answers. The community does, and the answers lie within the community. And so that's where you go to find them, the community.
I also wanted to say the talk was really amazing and super inspiring. I was curious about the expungement thing, like what crimes qualify for expungement, and then what do you have to do to prove that you should have it taken off your record?
So it's a great question. I should probably use this thing, shouldn't I? That's strapped to me.
Is it on?
Nope. All right. It's a great question. So in 2021, a new law went into effect that really expanded the opportunity for expungement services in Michigan. Certain offenses don't qualify, namely what we call in Michigan capital offenses. Even though we don't have capital punishment, those are crimes that are punishable by up to life in prison. So you're thinking of homicide, armed robbery, criminal sexual conduct, things like that. There is a limit on the number of crimes that can be expunged on the felony side of things, and it gets a little bit complicated because this isn't working, is it? This mic is. Oh, is it better? Now it's on. All right. All right. Okay. That better? No. Third option? No. Oh, this works. Okay, great. So there's a limit to the number of felonies. It's generally 3, though there's some exceptions for a one bad night, which means that if you committed a certain number of offenses within a 24-hour period, largely stemming from the same incident, right? You can imagine like a bar fight, you might catch a number of charges from that, but it doesn't really mean that you're an incorrigible person that doesn't deserve to have that opportunity for a clean slate. So that's an exception even to the 3 felonies counts. Misdemeanors generally are unlimited. You can generally expunge an unlimited number of misdemeanors. There's different waiting periods depending on the severity of the offense, but generally unlimited misdemeanors. The law was further expanded because drunk driving, operating while intoxicated, used to be categorically ineligible for expungement. Now, first-time drunk driving, OWI, is eligible for expungement. Second and successive offenses are not, and you can't have hurt or injured or killed anybody as a result of that incident and have it expunged. So really, it's a pretty expansive expungement law, right? Not everything qualifies, and there's still these waiting periods, right? And you do have to apply as things currently stand, but it is pretty expansive. And all of this is available on the prosecutor's website. We've got a number of graphics. And again, if anybody is potentially in need of expungement services, that's what the unit is there for, because there's, a variety of sort of different legal parameters that apply. And it can be really hard for people to figure it out on their own, right? So we provide that service absolutely free. We'll do the background check. We'll get you connected to a lawyer that you don't have to pay for. And part of the reason that's so important is because the number one reason people want an expungement is because they want to get a job, right? Private attorney is going to charge you about $2,000 to get an expungement. If you don't have the job because you have the criminal record, you can't get the attorney to get it off your record, and you're not going to be able to get the job, and it's just a vicious cycle. So we really felt strongly about being able to do this for free. It is sort of complicated in terms of the legal parameters, but that's why we have experts in our office that will help people out for free. I hope that gave a broad answer to your question.
We're going to need to trade back and forth now. There's a question that has come in on YouTube about whether other prosecutors' offices have reached out to you about implementing similar programs.
Yes, actually, and some of them have been out of state. I've had conversations with other prosecutors' offices, and actually specifically folks who run the victim witness services in those prosecutors' offices about restorative justice, wanting to hear how we were successful in the first part of our term in implementing restorative justice. And we've now done that both on the diversion and the deflection side. So that means that the moment a police report is drafted and comes to our office, you have an opportunity, if you're eligible, to participate, and provided that the victim, the survivor of a crime, says like, yes, I want to do this. That means that, and obviously the person who has caused the harm also has to want to do it. If both parties involved want to, they can participate as early as, pre-arraignment, pre-charge. And then if maybe folks are not ready and the case ends up being charged, there's an opportunity to participate. There will be very shortly an opportunity to participate in restorative justice post-charge once the case is bound over to circuit court. We have a local administrative order that has been sent off to scale this week by our chief judge in the circuit court, so that we can have some protections for folks who go through restorative justice and then can participate post-charge in circuit court. So yes, I've had those conversations, like I said, outside of Michigan. We also have some prosecutors within Michigan who have spoken to us about some of our policies that we put out early on. They also put out some of their own, very similar to ours. So I do think that what we're doing here is creating a model. We may not see a lot of it right now, but again, I try to work hard to create the world I want to live in, even if I never see it. So I am hopeful that one day a lot of the things that we are doing will take hold across the state.
And I just want to add to that we don't have a monopoly on good ideas either. We do talk regularly to prosecutors about a number of issues within Michigan and outside of Michigan, but we also steal ideas from them. For example, one policy that we didn't get really far into is we have a non-prosecution policy for the unauthorized use or possession of buprenorphine, which is commonly known by the brand name Suboxone, which is a medicine that people use when they are in recovery for opioids, right? And you can drive on it. It doesn't cause the same highs as opioids. It's something that's really safe to use. Ideally should be used as part of a treatment program, but sometimes people don't have that option, right? Or aren't in a treatment program, don't have a prescription, and its unauthorized use or possession can still be a felony. In Michigan, talked to my colleague actually in Vermont, Sarah Fair George, who implemented a non-prosecution policy for it. And she said, look, the year after that happened, overdose rates fell by 50%, because for a person that's looking for unauthorized buprenorphine, unauthorized Suboxone, it's not a choice between that and just like taking nothing. They need something, and it's going to be either that or heroin or fentanyl. And why on earth would we want to disincentivize people from using a medicine when we know the alternative is a much more dangerous drug that can lead to overdose fatalities? So we stole our policy from Vermont, given how well it's worked there with the support of the police chief and everything like that. So we're in constant conversation, both sharing our own ideas and our own experience, but also learning from others.
We have a bunch of questions in the room, so we'll get to a few of these.
Thank you for your time. Following up on kind of what you just said, looking at things like the opioid problem in Washtenaw County as well as nationally, what other policies and things is the office doing to ensure treatment and rehabilitation over criminalization for those individuals?
So a couple of things. One is just to set the stage. When I won my primary election in August, it's Washtenaw County, so you win the Democratic primary, you're going to win in November, right? And indeed, no Republican bothered to run. So we had a long lead time before taking office from August to January. And we used that to create a number of transition working groups with subject matter experts, folks from the community, to guide our policies. Because it's one thing to campaign, but we don't have all the answers, and it's another thing to put everything into practice. Those worked really well. We had folks from a variety of different perspectives, law enforcement, civil liberty attorneys, but I want to focus on our substance use working group, which had folks that are in recovery, medical professionals, folks that are subject matter experts in this, as well as, law enforcement, prosecutors, defense lawyers, everything like that. So a couple things. One is, I mentioned the Suboxone policy, and we kept these working groups in place because they were so useful. We were like, we don't want to just get into office and then retreat from the community. There's still stuff that's going on. And one thing they said is this is a great policy. They all signed off on it. We worked on it in collaboration with them using Vermont as the model. And then what we heard is this is great. We've got an issue also with people potentially fearing criminal consequences for unauthorized use or possession of methadone. And there's equity issues there because buprenorphine, for a variety of reasons, tends to be prescribed more, tends to be used more by by more highly educated, predominantly white folks. Methadone tends to be used by more people of color, folks with lower educational attainment levels. So, and both are medicines that people use to assist in their treatment. So they said, you should really consider expanding this to methadone. And methadone has different pharmacological effects, so we wanted to be a little bit more careful with that. But we generally put in place a similar policy at the advice of our substance use working group for methadone, right? Because again, it's the same thing. I don't want people using heroin or fentanyl. We've got to give them some other opportunities, some other off-ramps, and not discourage the use of medically assisted treatment, even if they're not using it, in compliance with a prescription plan. That doesn't mean they're felons, right? And we definitely don't want them using fentanyl, right? That's the main thing. It's about harm reduction. It's about saving lives. Beyond that, we don't charge cannabis. We don't charge entheogenic plants, psychedelic mushrooms. So don't charge those either. I don't need to get too far into it. But the other thing is, for folks that are coming in through the system, we really try to take a treatment-oriented lens, and there's sort of a hierarchy of intervention points that we can use. Our general guiding principle is that the least involved the prosecutor's office and the criminal legal system can be and still get somebody help, the better. So one program that, I want to give credit to the folks that actually put this together, because we were latecomers on this, put together by our sheriff's office, our public defender's office, and community mental health. It is called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion and Deflection. And that's at the street level, right? And so if somebody's coming in and they're dealing with a substance use issue, right, there's not a public safety threat. Before that program took off, officers basically have one choice, which is to arrest that person. With LEAD, instead of doing that, at the point of what would otherwise be arrest, they say, look, here's a referral to a caseworker, and what you've got to do is go within 30 days. That's all you got to do. We're still going to write the report. It'll be held. We're not taking you to jail, but the condition is you've got to go see this caseworker. They can connect you to services, treatment resources within 30 days. And the great thing about the LEAD program is it's not like a program in which if you slip up once, then the full weight of the criminal system comes down on you. We have a prosecutor in our office that tracks LEAD participants and various cases, because folks with substance use issues often have a number of cases. And if they're getting treatment, if they're getting help through lead, we don't want to just bring down like the 7 other cases and give them the criminal record they're trying to avoid with lead when they're on the right path anyway. So we work collaboratively with community mental health, with the public defender's office, with the sheriff's office on that. Sometimes that doesn't work, right? And sometimes maybe we need a little bit more intervention. And that's where something like our pre-plea diversion program can come in. That's post-charge, right? But we still try to connect people to substance use treatment, mental health treatment, whatever. Sometimes that doesn't work because that is too a pretty light touch, which is better if you can achieve success that way. But we also have a number of problem-solving courts in Washtenaw County, including a drug court, which is supervised by a judge. You're in treatment. You have weekly check-ins after like a collaborative team meeting with prosecutors, defense attorneys, treatment professionals, and the like. And at the end of the program, you graduate, right? And these are really, really great programs. The way that they're run in Washtenaw County, I think, is really wonderful. These exist in the courts. Judges create them. Prosecutors have a choice. First of all, a prosecutor has to sign off on the creation of them, which obviously we do. But at the end of that, once you graduate, prosecutors have a choice about whether to reduce criminal charges, whether to just not seek jail or whatever, or whether to dismiss them in its entirety. Our categorical position on that is if you do that hard work, do everything right, get help, graduate from that program, all of those criminal charges are being dismissed because what the hell are we doing, right? If we ask you to do that hard work, you do everything you're asked to do. Some people actually prefer jail rather than this. This is hard. If you want to talk about like, oh, there's no accountability, there is accountability with these programs. It is really hard to get into recovery. It takes a lot of effort. At the end of it, we shouldn't be saying, great, here's a reduced criminal charge. Here's, you don't have to go to jail. You should be able to have earned total dismissal of those criminal charges, and that's our standing office policy with respect to those courts.
Go. Hi, my name is Becca. I'm a Master's of Social Work candidate, and I'm studying policy and data analytics. And I wanted to know, as prosecutors who really focus on data, what types of data narratives are most persuasive to you? What type of data is helpful to you? Where do you usually look for that data?
That is a great question that could absolutely be the subject of an entire talk and probably an entire course. So I'll start by just saying that data in the criminal legal system is really horrible. And that's not Washtenaw County, right? We are actually, in some respects, a lot better than a lot of other places. But the criminal system was never built for backwards queries, right? We have case management systems, but it is virtually impossible to say, I want to, like with the systems that we have, want to run a regression and, see the number of Black people that are arrested for resisting and obstructing an officer within a certain parameter and break it down by age and outcomes of the cases. Like that should be something that happens. But like, honestly, when I took office, I wanted to know how many murder cases we had open, and we had an Excel spreadsheet, which just says murder cases, right? So that's the level of data. And again, it's not a Washtenaw County issue. It's nationwide. With respect to the data that we are trying to look at with the Prosecutor Transparency Project, which is really focused on racial equity primarily, we are really trying to figure out, okay, what points in the system are we seeing differential treatment, and is there what is the reason for that, right? And that takes both a quantitative and qualitative approach, right? I think quantitative measures are really helpful, right? So if you see a disparity in racial lines among people that are charged with, say, resisting and obstructing an officer, that's something you need to look into further. But you also have to be treating like cases alike. And I'll give you, an example here with the resisting and obstructing, right? Let's take three people. Person A is Black, and when being arrested, struggles a little bit while being handcuffed, right? And catches a resisting and obstructing an officer charge. Person B is white, and when being arrested, struggles a little bit with the officer when being arrested, and does not catch a resisting and obstructing charge. Person C is also Black, and when being arrested, punches, kicks, and injures an officer and is charged with resisting and obstructing. All those are going to show up in our system as resisting and obstructing. It is fair to say that there is differential treatment between person A and person B because they basically did the same thing, right? And the difference is race. Not really fair to say between person B and person C there is a differential because they just did different stuff. You can understand why you charge person C, but not person B. So we need that qualitative measure too, but we need the quantitative measure to know exactly where to look, right? To read those police reports and to undertake a qualitative analysis. So that's something that we're really focused on. That's the focus of the Prosecutor Transparency Project, which is largely geared towards racial equity. In terms of successfulness of programs, I really am looking a lot at recidivism rates, right? Do people complete the program successfully and do they catch a new criminal case? Because frankly, it's both of our beliefs that in a lot of ways, the traditional criminal system can make the community less safe because if somebody ends up with a criminal record on the other side of it, it prevents them from getting housing, it prevents them from getting jobs, from continuing their education. And those are exactly the things that we know are, if you have those in place, you're less likely to commit a crime, right? So what are we doing? We've got to be able to show that it works. And so that's why I love numbers like with our pre-plea diversion program. It's like, look, we got this person the help they needed. We're not doing nothing. We're asking to do something. There's still accountability there, right? But we didn't need to saddle them with a criminal record, and we haven't seen them come back through the system. And I think that's really important. I mean, I agree with Victoria. She's better at stories than me, obviously. But the stories really pull at people's heartstrings. But if you're really trying to get large-scale change, you need to be able to show that something works. And everybody's concern is always going to be public safety. And it's our concern, too. It's first and foremost, right? If you can show that we've been able to do this and not just not compromise public safety, but actually improve public safety, about a 92% success rate, that's really something that people should be looking at, right? So those are the kinds of things I look at. I figured you were going to let me answer that question.
So we're at 1:15 and I want to respect time, and there are also more questions in the room. Where are you all at? Or do you? So we'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll be done.
All right, two quick things. First, in the 21st century, I think the prosecutor's office has kind of changed where there's, this digital age now, and you have to have a website that looks new, and you're talking about using data and building systems and being able to have all that stuff. And first question would be, how many people in your office have STEM degrees or work in math and work in statistics and take a look at that for you? And secondly, there's been a lot of cool research now. I know the previous question talked about qualitative analysis of these cases, the difference between the same charge, about quantitatively making prosecutorial decisions based on purely numbers and machine learning models. And it's kind of a new age that's been around. I think in the past few years I read a few papers about it. And my question is, what do you think about those methods of using much more numbers driven and in some cases machine learning models to make these very human decisions?
Well, the first part of your question in terms of STEM degrees in our office, I am unaware of any of our prosecuting attorneys that have STEM degrees. Is it possible? Maybe.
Maria has a PhD.
Yeah, I don't think it's STEM. No,
I don't think it's STEM, but I think she does.
I tell you who does have all of that. The folks that we partner with for the data project, Trevor and JJ and Grady. In terms of the second part of your question, if we have considered some of those models to do some of the work in terms of making decisions, I'm going to be so transparent with you and tell you I would never trust a machine or just something that there's this automated process to make decisions for human beings that are at the center of the cases that we have in our office. I need human beings that, again, have capacity for empathy. I need people to work in my office that I can ask to look at a case backward and ask, what do you hope to come of this? The answer is, we don't want them to do it again. How do we achieve that? Do we achieve that by sending them to jail unnecessarily just to be harsh and punitive? Or do we achieve that by taking a step back, asking more questions of defense counsel, and fashioning a creative solution that's made just for them in the situation that can ensure accountability, that can ensure public safety, can ensure that they don't do this again and create more harm for someone else? To me, that's not anything that can be done on like an automated, robotic kind of a basis. You got to have, not just the brain, but you got to have the heart. You got to have the will to want to do the right thing, to want to make decisions that allow you to sleep at night and to wake up ready to do it all over again the next day.
When you identify that there's a need for a program in the county, but there isn't one, do you have funding or do you have partners that will help you fund and start programs or courses to do that? And also decentralize it so that if you're on the west side of the county, you're not forced to have to come all the way across the county to get services?
So I'll start with the last part of your question, which is a absolutely super important point that influences everything, frankly, in Michigan, right? Which is transportation. We just don't have a good public transportation infrastructure. And, you heard Victoria talking about with our My Brother's Keeper program, Jamal going and picking kids up. That's because they don't have transportation. So that's a barrier, and it's something that we absolutely have to address whenever we're coming up with a program. I wish I had a magic solution to it. It's just something that we always have to be thinking about in terms of getting people access to services. We don't have like a magic pot of money to build programs, unfortunately. So what we do is we have a belt and suspenders and Velcro approach to things. Some things we have line items in our office that can be used for stuff. Sometimes we need to go to the county and ask for more money. Sometimes we partner with courts, and they throw in some of their money. And the other thing that we did was with the first non-lawyer position that we had open in our office, we hired a development director, a grant writer, who's been able to secure, I think now north of $1.5 million in, philanthropic, state, and federal grants, not to bolster prosecution per se, but to pay for these types of programs with community partners. So the funding is a real issue, and it's our hope generally that we can continue down this path of allocating more funding to community programs, to diversion programs, to deflection programs that address the root causes of issues. But it's something that we have to constantly be looking for money around. We've had some successes thus far, and as we continue to expand, you always got to find a way to pay for it. So.
And can I just give a shout out to that special gem? Her name is actually Ruby, and she is a gem for many reasons, not just because of her name. But I want to give a shout out to Ruby for being that development officer in our office that he just told you has raised over $1 million because she was at one point connected to Poverty Solutions, and she may be watching. Hello, Ruby, and we love you, and we thank you for all you do for this community.
Echo that. I echo that.
Way to go, Ruby. Thanks so much, Ellie and Victoria, for this wonderful talk. I know that I've been mentioned a couple of times as working on the prosecutor dashboard side of the Prosecutor Transparency Project. It's been some of the most meaningful work that I've done looking to that, and we're really excited about things that can happen there. I know that there are still some questions in the room, and I'm happy we can maybe talk a little bit afterwards. And also you can direct questions to me, and I can get you versions of answers of them too. But let's thank Ellie and Victoria for the wonderful talk.
Thank you all.
Feel free to share our email addresses with the audience, and they can always email to any questions they have.